If the time and place are right, almost anything can be considered creepy in one's own eyes. Anything typically considered regular or mundane can incite the most visceral reactions in people. What one may consider creepy could vary widely, from scary or thrilling images to mysterious animals to urban myths and legends. Even the framework of many societies and culture almost always has an underbelly of creepy places, events, or stories. Consider a high school group of kids having a conversation, discussing new trends on social media or exciting things happening at school, and eventually having that conversation turn towards a much darker subject. After all it could take is a single word or even a devious look from somebody in the conversation to know where these discussions will go. Now, imagine that same conversation is about something very close to home for you, something that seems remarkably familiar, leaving you without that sense of security that this is just a story and probably isn't true. This was my first experience with Shireland. Now, today, I would like to discuss a theme park, once vibrant and full of life and activity, now abandoned and left to decay. A park ultimately frozen in time, holding physical memories of what once was, like an older man reminiscing upon days of his youth. Before I discuss any further, I would like to make a disclaimer. This video is in no way used to demean or to vilify the park's creator or anyone involved in its upbringing. I am simply referring to the information available to me and telling this story as someone from the outside looking in. Now, without further ado, let's continue. The name of this park was Shireland, located in Hampshire, Illinois. And this is my experience of finding out about this park, its history, and subsequent story of its opening and life as an attraction, to its eventual closing and result thereafter, and also my experience of going there myself, and why I will probably never go back. Born on August 3rd, 1928, Thomas J. Smirt would be born into a difficult family life, from having his father pass away at 4 years of age and going through several different stepfathers, to dropping out before he passed the 8th grade, to eventually a career in the military, which would lead him into later becoming a successful businessman and inventor. One of his most notable inventions would be the upside down aerosol spray can, used widely in municipal and highway settings. Thomas would also be very active in his charity work as well, even going as far as to call his local police station to see what resources they would need. In this case, it was pocket knives to cut away seatbelts from car accident victims, which he would ultimately supply to that same police station. This success Thomas was having over his career as a businessman would lead eventually to one of the most ambitious projects that he would ever bring to fruition. On May 28th, 1988, Thomas would hold a grand opening for a new Shire horse-based theme park on Dietrich Road and Lake Street in Hampshire, Illinois. This park covered 111 acres and contained a 68,000 square foot circus tent, along with four other 10,000 square foot exhibit tents, which could be moved around if needed. Horse and pony rides, snacks and amusement park foods, and an overall atmosphere of joy and memories was the main attraction of Shireland. This, even to this day, still has locals of the surrounding areas recalling memories of this attraction from their childhood, seemingly leaving a memorable impression on them, even after all of these years. In this video, we can see that a large train ride was used to ferry people around the park, showing the exhibits and decorations the park had to offer. For Shireland was comprised almost solely of movable tents, as mentioned previously. These tents contained horses, most notably the Great English Shire breed, circus clowns, other performers, and even performance cannons, all of which would be used to hold performances for the attending crowds. One can only imagine now what joy or elation the parkgoers would have experienced, considering that they probably weren't expecting this theme park to have many things to see. It wasn't Six Flags or Disney World after all. Some of the images shown here are the performances Shireland would hold, showing that for most employees, high school and college age people would have been the main demographic of workers, with a few exceptions of a few potentially professionally trained horse riders as well. This would seem most reasonable considering Shire horse breeds are incredibly large and powerful animals. In another video, here we are shown what one of these performances may have looked like. The use of clowns, magic tricks, and party games were seemingly the majority of the performances that Shireland would hold, aside from their horse shows. With Shireland's location not relatively close to most cities or many major metropolitan areas, the majority of Shireland's audience relied mainly on promotional artwork and signs, or billboards for their advertising. This was the late 1980s, and even for the time, digital or radio advertisements usually were reserved for businesses that had the access or funds to create more widespread advertisements. As of the recording of this video, I could not locate any radio or TV ads for Shireland. If any of you viewers are able to potentially locate any of these pieces of media, please feel free to share. Also, Thomas even created a sort of superhero as a sort of mascot for Shireland called Supershire, and his companion, Jimmy, who solved crimes and would help children or people in danger. Also, according to Thomas, he printed 35,000 copies of these comic books that were sent out. This, all things considered, is an impressive piece of promotion that Thomas added to the experience of Shireland, assuming the number of comics sent out by Thomas is true. Despite the seemingly friendly and welcoming demeanor of the park, and the large amount of advertising and production that this rural theme park had, it, unfortunately, would not be enough to garner financial stability for very long. For Shireland would only be open roughly a year in total, being open for a season in 1988 and being closed in both 1989 and 1990, eventually only opening for another season in 1991 and closing shortly thereafter. The reason for Shireland's downfall could be speculated to multiple factors, which, while being reasonable assumptions, these are still speculation and should be taken into account as such. From Thomas's supposed volatile nature and how he treated his staff, due to a long history of childhood abuse and a dark family life, to waning interest of parkgoers and in the genres of fantasy and animal-themed attractions, most likely due to the technological boom of personal devices such as the Nintendo Entertainment System and VCR, to iconic movies and video games in the late 80s and early 90s. To even a controversy of alleged pornographic images taken on the grounds of Shireland Park. Without further ado, I would like for us to explore the darker side of Shireland, and ultimately what I think caused its downfall. As mentioned previously, the creator of Shireland, Thomas J. Smidt, was known by many people as many different things. Thomas, aside from being a successful businessman, also had a passion for horses, especially the Shire breed. He would eventually become a breeder of these horses to keep their breed alive, to which he would even donate 40 to the Cassian unit of the United States Army. On the surface, Thomas comes off as a generous man who also had a noble vision of taking care of his community, going as far as to create a theme park, Shireland, whose purpose is to be that of good conquering evil. He's even quoted as saying, "Some children today aren't even allowed to enjoy their childhood without violence, drugs, and other dragons infringing on their dreams." Shireland was supposed to deliver that message to kids. But according to those employed by him, tells a different story. Thomas supposedly had a volatile nature, which would lead one to assume that he most likely had a hard time keeping and maintaining a decent staff to run the park. According to the author of this webpage, detailing a lot of the information on Shireland that I have been referencing in this video, he himself, along with other accounts of people who knew him, have full stories containing their experiences interacting with him. The first story we will read is of the website's author, of whom was recalling his experience with Thomas for while he was interviewing for a video editor position, had this to say regarding his experience. When I saw a similar ad for a video engineer slash editor on Monster.com from Fox Valley Farms, I couldn't send in my resume fast enough. Thomas J. Smith called me the next day and relived his insane brand of philosophy on just about every subject in the world, from religion to politics and everything in between. Unlike last time, Mr. Smith called me at 11 in the morning, a much more user-friendly time of the day. He told me he was interested in talking to me because I used to work for that company, aka Swiderski Electronics, and they, according to Smith, sold a lot of good stuff, video equipment. He controlled every aspect of the conversation, asking me how old my children are and how many Excel spreadsheets I have made. "A million?" he asked. When I answered no, he said, "Good. 100,000, he asked again. Again, I answered with a no. I tried to tell him that I used to teach Excel classes for New Horizons Computer Learning Centers, but he didn't want to hear that. We finally settled on 1,000 as the amount of Excel spreadsheets I created. He determined that I created a spreadsheet a day for 5 years. Then he asked me if I knew how he figured that out. He said, there are 250 work days in the year, and 5 times 250 is 1,000. I sat at awe and wondered how obtuse he was. What was to say I didn't do 5 spreadsheets a day for a year? What would happen to his logic if I created a spreadsheet on my day off? Who cares how many spreadsheets anyone has ever created? He revisited his tirade about how American students don't learn shit in school. He told me that 85% of all elementary school and middle school teachers are criminals. He determined that because 85% of all teachers are women, and women don't know what a little boy wants. He said, a little boy wants to go into business for himself. I thought that he hasn't spent much time lately with little boys, because most of the boys that I know don't even know what it means to go into business for themselves. He said that women can't teach a boy how to go into business for themselves, because they are women, I guess. Therefore, little boys have to learn that on the job. The inference I extrapolated was that women can't teach boys because boys want to go into business, and since women are not boys, they can't teach boys anything. By far, I found that to be the lost, lopsided syllogism I have ever heard. I had another call come in and I clicked over. When I went back, he hung up. When I called him back, he told me that he had thrown my resume away, assuming that I didn't want to hear his voice anymore. Something tells me that a lot of other people got tired of listening to his insane machinations and hung up on him. The interview. I couldn't pass up the opportunity to meet this enigmatic man. I accomplished my goal by sitting mute while he rambled through an insane diatribes for 2.5 hours. He drove me around his entire farm, a massive piece of land west of the Shireland property. Like the little boy that he claims to be, he seems to enjoy buying things, playing with them for a while, and then abandoning them. Although, just like another insane genius, Howard Hughes, he never disposes of anything. He puts them in storage. We passed the massive sheds that contain the dragons from Shireland. I asked what the 6 or 7 trailers were that we passed. He told me they were the shit houses from Shireland. Why he kept that stuff, I do not know. The property was littered with trucks, plows, and even houses on ponds that he alleged built, that no one lives in. Our conversation would go from how he wants to create DVDs that will promote family values and send them to non-profit organizations all over the world, to how Muslims are trying to take over the world by having 6 or 7 children, while we, in the United States, cap off our child production at 2 or 3. He talked about being in the army in the 1950s, donating horses to the military in the 1980s, and the present day as though they were all happening at the same time. He told me how he grew up with no father and how his mother was cock crazy, which led to him having a series of stepfathers. One stepfather in particular would tie him up and gag him and hang him and his 3-year-old sister upside down in a closet. Heck of a thing to tell someone in a job interview. I had to tread lightly when it came to asking questions about Shireland, because Smith is a very volatile man. He did say that Shireland broke me emotionally and every other way. He said that one thing that led to his emotional breakdown was the protesters that were there at the park at the day it opened. It seemed that a rival group of horse breeders tried to squash his efforts, according to him. That was the first time I had ever heard such a story. I asked him how many people worked at Shireland, and he answered, 100. When I acted surprised, he said, well, maybe 50. I concluded that dealing with the employees and general public was more than what he was willing to take. He concluded by saying that he wants to make videos about Shireland, but didn't know what he would do with it once it was completed. Many things made more sense to me after meeting Thomas Smith. The first thing was that he had an unhappy childhood, which explains why he created an idyllic setting like Shireland. He had an unhappy school experience, largely because he needed to learn in an alternate learning environment, which he could be involved in problem-based learning type scenarios. Having said that, I don't think such practices existed when he was in school. He is a self-made man and has been able to make his millions on his own terms, a condition that he does not want to sacrifice in anything that he does. That is a consideration that has alienated him from many opportunities. He, however, doesn't realize that he is unique and that most people don't have his intelligence, his fortitude, and his iconoclasm to want to forge their way into the world alone as he has. Finally, he is so intelligent that his mind is restless. He has to be involved in things that keep him involved, occupied, and happy. Possibly the biggest thing that I learned through all of this is that if Smith would have closed the park in 1991 and yanked down all the buildings, none of these websites, mine included, would have ever been created. Shireland would have been a distant memory, like Garfield Goose or Commando Cody. The abandoned buildings themselves would have been the very thing that kept Shireland alive in our minds. Sadly, Shireland, like George Bailey from It's a Wonderful Life, is more popular dead than alive. Anyone who is so brash, so needy to spread his bizarre message and so powerful due to his wealth is going to step on toes. And here is another account of a married couple interacting with Thomas while visiting Fox Valley, attending a sale. My husband and I attended the sale at Fox Valley last Saturday. We thought it would be a nice outing since we raise Shire horses ourselves. I am glad we were not there to purchase anything. We were very disappointed in the SHS registered stock that was offered for sale to the public. Many animals with swelled hocks, umbilical hernias, respiratory problems, etc. Mr. Smith made a spectacle of himself in front of a group of potential buyers and Shire enthusiasts on Saturday. The quality of the stock over 2 years of age was disappointing enough. Mr. Smith managed to upset many people, made one girl cry. Mr. Smith started driving recklessly around the farm, shouting at people to get out of the pastures and feedlots and to leave those horses alone. I did not witness anyone harassing or chasing the horses. I did see people, along with the farm's hired hands, attempting to calmly capture various young horses. Arrived and then decided, while the folks were loading their horses, that he would not accept personal checks with letters from your bank guaranteeing payment. This obviously upset people. When we were leaving, we heard Mr. Smith shouting at a bunch of people, saying that he was tired of people with no money trying to buy horses from him. We have done business with some of these people that tried to purchase a horse via check. We would not hesitate to accept a personal check from the same people. Their credit is good with us, and they would not spend the money on a horse if they didn't have it in their account. Needless to say, these events made us feel sick at heart. I just hope that Mr. Smith's behavior does not reflect the Shire Horse Society and its members. I hope that the people who left the sale because of his behavior will not lose their interest in the Shire horse. There are many other Shire breeders in the United States who would welcome buyers, fellow Shire breeders, and Shire enthusiasts to their farms. Also recorded are these accounts of unlawful interactions that Thomas had with others in his community. The February 14th, 2002 edition of the Daily Herald reports Thomas John Smith, 73, of the 114 South Grand Highway, Marengo, turned himself into a Cary police at 10 a.m., February 6th, on a McHenry County warrant for simple assault and battery. According to a police report, the incident occurred on the 600 block of Industrial Drive. 2 months later, April 21st, 2003, the Daily Herald reports, Cary businessman Thomas Smith may not be an ideal boss, but that doesn't make him a criminal. That was the ruling last week from a McHenry County judge who acquitted the 74-year-old Marengo man of 2 misdemeanors stemming from his treatment of a former employee. Smidt, who owns Cary-based Fox Valley Systems, was charged last year with battery and disorderly conduct following a September 8th run-in with a former worker, Deborah Powers. According to the allegations, Smidt threatened and screamed at Powers, then grabbed her arm while taking away her time card. However, during a one-day trial last week, Smith's attorney, Mark Uteg, argued his client never threatened Powers, but engaged in a verbal dispute not uncommon between worker and boss. As for the time card, Uteg said it was company property and Smith had every right to take it. In her ruling, Judge Sharon Prather scolded Smith for his behavior, calling it ungentlemanly. But ultimately, she said, he did not commit a crime. I would suggest in the future you be more careful in how you treat your employees, Prather added. Your actions may not be criminal, but nonetheless, if this happened, they were not appropriate. Last week's acquittal does not end Smith's legal woes. He is scheduled to return to a court June 23rd for a pretrial hearing on misdemeanor battery and assault charges stemming from a confrontation with another former employee last year. On October 25th, 1999, the Illinois Department of Human Rights filed a complaint on behalf of complainant Tricia A. Brock. That complainant alleged that respondents, Fox Valley Systems Incorporated, and Thomas Smith sexually harassed and constructively discharged complainant. The following information was derived in a finding of fact investigation. 1. Respondent, Thomas Smith, Fox Valley Systems Incorporated, hired complainant Tricia A. Brock on March 14, 1997. Complainant's position was telephone salesperson. 2. Respondent Thomas Smith was the manager of Fox Valley Systems Incorporated. In actuality, he was and is the owner. 3. On June 5, 1998, Smith asked complainant if he could squeeze a lump in her breast. Italics added. 4. Complainant found Smith's request unwelcome and she informed him of the fact. 5th. On July 16, 1998, complainant left the employ of Fox Valley Systems Incorporated. Based upon the information at hand, even assuming all its factual allegations to be true, the complaint in this matter does not state a claim upon which relief can be granted. Accordingly, it is recommended that the complaint in this matter be dismissed in its entirety, with prejudice. Italics added. One of the most intriguing and strange things I uncovered while researching Shireland was the lingering controversy of how a photographer and model were arrested on the grounds of Shireland for taking pornographic images. Keep in mind, these images were taken after the park had closed and no one would have been around, but it still doesn't shake the ominous feeling I got from why this would even happen at a place meant for children and even happening in broad daylight. I am the photographer who was involved in the incident that now seems to have become an urban legend. I feel no need to defend myself or justify what we did. It is actually quite amusing to me how this story has been exaggerated. At the request of the owner of this site, I have relayed the actual facts of the incident. I used to go out to Rockford quite a bit from the Chicago area, and I used to pass Shireland all the time. About 4 years ago, I actually stopped by and explored the land. This was before no trespassing signs were posted. I found the land not only fascinating with its dilapidated buildings and remnants of Shireland, but I also thought the land itself was very eye-catching. I had been a photographer for 30 years. Glamour, fashion, artistic, and figure photography, not porn. And realized this would be a great location to do a shoot at. I am always looking for locations to do unique shoots at. And the land and buildings at Shireland presented a very interesting contrast to the beauty of the nude female. I told a model I had worked with before about my idea, and she was immediately interested. I went out about a week before the shoot to scope it out again. The land now had no trespassing signs on it, but it was still easily accessible simply by stepping through the gates. We went out on a Saturday afternoon and freely walked around and shot in just about every corner and accessible building on the land. We shot very beautiful artistic photos and did some work with light and shadows, nothing that could be construed in any way as porn. We were pretty much doing our very last shots when 2 troopers drove up. It turns out someone that leases the land from the owners was fishing in a pond there and saw us and called the sheriff's office. It was about an hour from the time the call came in and the time that they arrived. The troopers were actually very nice once they learned what we were doing, and that we were not vandalizing anything. They explained that they got called out regularly to the site there, and there had been a great deal of vandalism recently. They actually attempted to talk the man into not pressing charges, but he insisted to, as he put it, make an example out of us. We were charged with criminal trespassing and nothing else. We made a first court appearance to enter a plea, which was not guilty. At our second appearance, the complaining witness did not show up, and the state's attorney asked for a continuance because the witness was in Wisconsin working and couldn't get back to the court date. The attorney stated that the witness was definitely interested in pressing the charges. At our third appearance, he was a no-show again, and the charges were dropped. This was about 6 months after our arrest. I have no problem admitting we broke the law by trespassing and have no malice against the troopers who arrested us. They did what they had to do and were very nice to us. They actually seemed a little annoyed that the guy wanted to pursue the charges. I feel pretty confident that the witness never intended to show up and just pressed the charges to try to scare us. All in all, it was a minor nuisance, we have a great story to tell, and we got some amazing photos. That's pretty much it. No porn shots, no porn movies, no snuff films, no satanic cults. It is actually quite amusing to me how much this relatively uninteresting and quite harmless incident has grown into a widely exaggerated stories it has. It's actually kind of fun to be part of an urban legend. One of the last things that I want to mention in this video is my experience of going there myself. These photos you are seeing are of when I went there to explore the park in all of its dilapidated glory in the dark hours of night. These also were not recent, as these photographs are at least 5 years old at this point, and the current state of the park, or what is currently still there, or what moved into there, even now remains unknown to me. The most thrilling thing that happened to me while I was there was being spooked by something moving in the overgrown vegetation while I was walking the paths of the park. A deer had actually run past me, which nearly made my heart jump out of my chest, as exploring abandoned places that you've never been to before while at night isn't exactly the time or place you want to be startled by something like that. Overall, it was a nice experience to see a piece of history almost frozen in time, hidden away in an ever-advancing world that has left it behind for decades now. Despite the odd and darker parts of this park's history being still a mystery that I will probably never uncover fully, the idea of Shireland being almost a safe haven for children was a noble intention that stuck with me that I truly believe was one of the driving factors of why Shireland existed in the first place. Almost a last attempt to incite imagination and to protect the innocence of children from a world that can strip it away from them, or from the advancements of technology that control the fragile minds of youth, making them vulnerable to attacks from strangers and those who would do them harm on the internet, or corroding away their desire to play outside and enjoy the world for its beauty, making them slaves to digital screens. Due to Thomas's rough upbringing and lack of a childhood himself, it makes sense that he would want to give to other children for which he could not experience himself. Whether or not the things written about Thomas are true, it's important to know that no person is perfect, and oftentimes there are two sides to every story. I can only hope that we one day can bring back places like Shireland that incite imagination into children's minds and allow free thinking for themselves, rather than being exposed to a multitude of technologies at younger and younger ages, almost forcing them to act and think in certain ways. Hey guys, it's Jake, the guy who made this video, and I wanted to say thank you so much for watching. This is the first time I've ever done a video like this before, and if you guys are interested in seeing more content like this, I would love to make some more for you. Anyways, thanks again for watching, and if you haven't already, like, share, and subscribe. It definitely means a lot. Thanks, guys.